Okay, I'll wait till you're okay. Cool.
All
Okay,
right.
so I'm actually meaning to tell you that like I wouldn't worry too much about having the flags configurable for other
Mhm.
clouds. Like I guess just support AWS. So as long as the hard coded flags support AWS and GCE for now, we can like I'll worry about configuring it when I add DO support for it later. So like I didn't want you to go through the trouble of doing it now if we don't need it.
Right. We don't need it right now. My biggest priority is actually updating test infra
Yeah.
to call to use CCM
Yeah.
and then add tests in Kubernetes. So that's the tests that run every time
Yeah.
we build.
Sounds good. Do
So
you know what clouds you're gonna run against though?
I'm going to start with the simplest one, just AWS, and then we can slowly iterate and add more clouds.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
The second thing is I also made a pull request for the concepts behind CCM.
Yeah.
It got it was reviewed a bunch of times. If either of you have a chance to look at it, that'll be great. Give you a review.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that. It's been on the backlog.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just for me, it's just a matter of finding time, but
I
I'll get
understand.
around to it soon.
Thank you. So let me paste a link to that pull request here in the chat. There. So Andrew, and I guess Walter is here as well now. Oh, hey, Jago. Um, Andrew from Oracle, you wanted to raise an issue about Josh's pull request. Can we talk?
Yeah, so as he pointed out in an issue previously, when the CCM is in process of deleting a service, if it exits, then a service can be deleted without the corresponding resources in the cloud. And the resolution to that was to make to add finalize the support to the service controller to ensure that it does do that cleanup and delete. So Josh has opened, and I'll just link to it now in the chat, a PR there just to get some feedback on his approach. Still needs work cleaning up the tests, etc. But just to kind of make sure he was going in the right direction, really. So just if people could take a look, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I have some time today. I'll look at it.
Cheers.
Yeah, I think it'd also be good to loop someone in who wrote the initial service controller or whoever owns, because that's not just for CCM, that's also the kube controller manager. So it's pretty much going to affect every cloud. So get that reviewed by someone else too.
Yeah, I think Lucas made that point when it was first raised, and hopefully the correct people are looped in there.
Cool.
Great. All right, what else are we talking about today? Opening up the doc. My internet is being really slow right now. I don't know why.
I wanted to bring up something.
Okay.
So the work to reverse the kubelet data flow for TLS Bootstrap. Yeah, so I just haven't had time recently just to work on that. So essentially, the main blocker for me is actually like going through the TLS bootstrapping code and like learning how that works before I decide to like just like come up with an implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if anyone has time to pick that up or wants to pick it up, please do. But maybe for another like week or two, I won't be able to get around to it.
So do you think, I mean, we can add a issue saying help wanted?
Sure.
I think that'll be good. If
Okay.
someone can help, that'll be great. Is Walter there? Jacob, is he with you?
I ducked into a one-person room.
Okay.
I don't see him at his desk right now. I think he did have an update on some progress that he's made.
Right.
Maybe he shared that with you
He
yesterday,
did.
Sid.
Yeah. So what he was talking about was remerging the node controller in the cloud controller back into the node controller and the kube controller manager. The reason he stated, which I think is valid, is we're maintaining two different implementations of almost the same thing. And so I also asked him to send an email on our Google group, and he did. So what's happening is the node controller in the cloud controller manager does just two things on top of the existing node controller, and it looks like all the changes that are happening in the main node controller are only happening there and not being reflected in the CCM. There was an IP address management module added into the KCM's node controller, but it was not added into CCM's node controller, and we don't want this kind of disparity. And I think he rightly came up with the idea to merge them back together, and so he's already making a pull request for it. There were some concerns, for the remerging. One of them being the CCM's node controller addresses nodes by provider ID instead of just node name, which is one of the things we did. And also it early initializes a node in the sense that it before the node is considered schedulable, it goes to the cloud and finds some information about it and then brings it back puts it back into the node object. So yeah, this is the discussion we had, and he was going to bring this up today here. That's.
I was just taking a couple notes. I will see if I can track him down. Let's move on, and if there are other parts to talk about. So we have some bugs that Josh is working on. I'm working on end-to-end tests. Before the next meeting, I should have the test infra harness being able to call CCM and run automated E2E tests on it. We won't necessarily have the tests themselves. It'll just be able to call the tests if needed. And I think other than that, Andrew from DigitalOcean is going to be working on the TLS bootstrapping thing in a few weeks. Other than that, do we have anything else? Lucas is not here. Is that right?
No, he's not.
He had a thought about how to submit tests to test grid, and I never followed up on that. Was there any more discussion on that? The topic here is essentially that we need to manage the risk of changes in one part of the code affecting a cloud provider that the author is not paying attention to. And the suggestion that Lucas had, which I think is a good one, is to create a dashboard in test grid that cloud providers can optionally submit their own CI results to. And if I imagine this, I imagine a test grid with a bunch of cloud providers on each row, and maybe the summary results from a test run. And you can imagine if one cloud provider turns red after a pull request, you can use TestGrid's diff tool to determine what the change was. And you could determine what change broke that cloud provider. A vertical line down that where all cloud providers get borked by someone who doesn't even know this exercise is going on, for example, would indicate that something more invasive has gone awry. But I was struggling to figure out how we could manage this kind of risk, and I think this is a really reasonable approach. I don't think we can require cloud providers to opt into this, but I think it is a really useful mechanism for enabling the community in best faith effort to not break others by accident. Otherwise, there's really no holistic way that I can imagine an author for one focused on one cloud provider to really avoid breaking someone else and not knowing.
So did we run these tests on every pull request, or like how are we going to?
Well, I think that's going to be up to cloud providers to figure out how their own CI/CD pipeline works. But yes, I mean, I would imagine that this is a CI type of test run, and so it would be just like we currently have for in TestGrid, that every pull request, their tests are executed in GCE. I think the benefit to this is that it gets run on other cloud providers, and we really ensure that the portability that we're communicating to end users is the benefit of Kubernetes. One of the primary benefits is portability of workloads, and I think this is critical to that effort.
That leads me to one question, like which clouds? So actually two. One of them is, are we going to stop the pull request from being merged until all of the tests are green? And two, what cloud, I mean, are we going to allow just about any cloud to add their CI into?
Well, I think just adding to that also, it seems like if cloud providers are opting to post the results, then for any out of tree cloud providers, like I need to do a vendor update on Kubernetes core to actually see the results. So there's technically no way to block a pull request from going in, unless every Kubernetes pull request, I'm also creating an upstream or downstream pull request with that vendor change. And it seems like, from my experience personally, I only vendor in release candidates or actual releases.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like any critical bugs that would break my cloud provider would essentially never be caught until after I vendor in and run tests.
Okay. So just to step back and articulate the goal more clearly, my goal in this effort is that all cloud providers are eventually out of tree cloud providers. This is why Google, which is currently an in-tree cloud provider, is investing in the effort of extracting our own code. And we feel strongly that this is a case where we need to lead by example and say even Google is doing this, and demonstrate that it is possible and it is clearly the right way to do this. I really don't want to have sort of the first and second class cloud providers. I don't think that's the right direction for the project. Also, as the operator of a product built on Kubernetes, there are benefits to iterating our own cloud provider code without waiting for the in-tree Kubernetes quarterly releases to go out. So I feel really strongly about this, and I think this is something that we need to solve in the general case. I would encourage everyone here to look for other benefits, ways where new features go essentially into the out-of-tree cloud providers first, more than just the stick of eventual deprecation and removing code. But this is something where it doesn't come for free. Folks are going to have to do some work to get this to work. Yeah. And I think the one that I don't have a good answer for, maybe someone here knows more about this one, but the OpenStack implementation is the one I'm not sure there's someone currently staffed or willing to make that happen as it currently exists. Does someone here on that one? Yeah, this is my understanding. Anyway, we do need to invest in the tooling, and part of the tooling is encouraging cloud providers to submit to TestGrid. I think you raise a good point about the effort or infrastructure required to do it on a CI basis instead of just for release candidates. But I think this deserves some more attention once we get it past the yes, it's possible, and into the productization. And I expect it will take a quarter or two to kind of get to that level of maturity. So that's my thought on it. But I think it's really important to start now instead of waiting until we're trying to make more formal push to get this done.
I think that's a good idea. Do you think we should, I don't know, I feel like we should write this down somewhere so people can refer to it, and we can also show it when people add pull requests into the existing cloud providers.
I mean, from what I remember from what Lucas was saying, the tests wouldn't block merging of PRs, certainly. And I certainly agree that it's definitely worth investing in this. And if we can collaborate on some kind of tooling, scripts, etc., to handle maybe the kind of common dependency management tools to automate that, so that new cloud providers can just pick up the scripts, modify it to their requirements, and then just use that. It shouldn't be prohibitively kind of expensive to do that vendor update necessarily. Obviously, you're not necessarily merging that vendor update downstream when the pull request is initiated on the Kubernetes side. You can simply just do the vendor update, run the test suite, and then report your results back to the test grid, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think this is quite closely related to the conformance discussions as well, as we move away from a single set of binaries that run on any cloud to separate binaries on different cloud providers. I think from my perspective, there's a benefit to understanding when the Google products go out of conformance, either because there's a bug in the test or there's now some new requirement that we don't yet meet. Knowing that as early as possible is a clear benefit. So I think there's likely some overlap in those efforts, and potentially some people we can ask to help out and kind of collaborate on a solution there. So I will try and write something up in the next couple of weeks. It won't be this week, but please do bring it up if you don't see anything in a couple weeks, and we'll keep pushing on it. But I appreciate your thought, and I think it is critical that we have a few cloud providers which are participating in a process which seems to work, and then we can invite others to participate in the same process. But if it's just one cloud provider, it doesn't have a whole lot of weight. I was really uncomfortable with the situation a few months ago when we had essentially stopped taking PRs for new cloud providers, but this path was not actually well fleshed out. That seems to be the way some things work, where the old way is deprecated, but the new way isn't done yet. And I think we need to really provide clear guidance and a good path forward.
I agree.
Yeah. Great.
I think that's it for today.
Yeah.
Okay. If Walter didn't yet send an email out to the group, I will ask him to do that. And if he has, it seems like there are a few open questions on his path forward. So if we can get some closure there, that would be great.
All right.
Great.
See you all next week.
Okay.
See you later, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.